Well, here in 2024, I think the company that has had probably the biggest collapse and is on the verge of death is Ubisoft. It is honestly astonishing how every single video it feels like this company just gets so much worse. And now we have their newest creation, which is, yes, an original NFT game. I think a lot of us viewed this as a fad that kind of fell apart the last couple of years, but Ubisoft has only continued to double down. Here we have Champions Tactics, which I'm sure that this is going to make the millions and billions of dollars that they definitely want, and it's not going to end up like their Ubisoft Quartz program, which went absolutely nowhere. I'm sure that this will be a success. But we also have some recent Star Wars Outlaws information, which again just points to this game being another massive flop for Ubisoft. Again, this was supposed to be a massive single-player open world Star Wars game, the first one we got in years outside of Electronic Arts, and it just did not click with gamers. It was met to a meh reception from users and critics, and now that Park Place reports, Star Wars Outlaws sales appear to have completely stagnated. His average Twitch viewership has declined by over 99%. Another game that they really were hedging on this being a massive success story for them, and it has done the complete opposite and really screwed this company here in 2024 and made them extremely worried about Assassin's Creed Shadows, which truly could be the final straw that could tank this company into another company owning Ubisoft. Maybe that be Tencent or another company. We'll see what happens. But we also did have Assassin's Creed Shadows information, which we got some new collector's edition details. The price has actually been drastically lowered by $50, I guess, for those individuals that want a statue of Yasuke and Neo. That still is on the way, but there have been some very interesting changes. One of those is the fact that the early access period is definitely canceled, and this is something that Ubisoft has confirmed. I thought that was kind of obvious when they announced, you know, the whole delay and everything, but no, it's definitely gone. They're not doing that. Maybe something that they don't do in the future. We'll see what happens with other games. But Joe Raptor, another content creator, outlined a lot of the interesting changes with the collector's edition, and there are some notable ones. Skill points are now called mastery points. The art book has a new cover and 8 pages are removed. They likely removed controversial artwork. See image 3, I'll put it on the screen. Ubisoft first said this wasn't possible when the game would launch on November 15th. The artwork includes flags that didn't make sense for the setting of Shadows, plus Ubisoft used them without consent. Seems like more art is removed though. And specifically what Raptor is referencing is an incident that we talked about over the summer, in which a real-life Japanese reenactment group's flag was used in the concept art for the game that was going to be featured in that collector's edition. Ubisoft apologized, pretty much said there's nothing we can do, and the reenactment group really wasn't satisfied with this response, and they also pointed out that their flag was not meant for that specific era that Ubisoft's trying to portray in Shadow. So just one of those other incidents and disasters that has hit this game, and now it appears they're being a little bit more proactive, especially with the game being moved a couple of more months. But it was also noted here that the envelope for the 2 lithographs has been removed. Ubisoft already confirmed that early access is gone, but they also remove the Red Dragon filter from the digital content. Pre-orders get next to the first expansion for free, also a bonus quest at launch, but it's unclear if this is the previous pre-order mission, image 4, the previous season pass exclusive mission, or something else. And then the small text now includes content and release dates may change, which that's very interesting, and it definitely gives credence to the perspective that this game might be delayed further. And I've talked about it many times, and I've said this a couple times since the game has been delayed, but that February month is absolutely stacked, and I would not be surprised to see whether that be Assassin's Creed Shadows or another game moved, and maybe it is Shadows. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, the problems at Ubisoft have only been growing, and their one success story of 2024 has been Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. It's a game that was obviously met to critical acclaim, as you can see here on OpenCritic. It was one of the games that really started off 2024, making people believe maybe 2024 would be an impressive year for gaming. It's been up and down, but the game did not sell all that well. It only sold just under 1 million units. There was some earlier indication that the first month it had only sold about 300,000 units, and that's a disaster for this game. Ubisoft obviously had higher ambitions, and it was not met here. But ultimately, the blame is on Ubisoft for not marketing this game properly, and the developers did their job. They made a great experience, a great Metroidvania, and that just, I guess, isn't enough in 2024, especially when you have to get millions of sales, especially for a big publisher like Ubisoft. Their ambitions are higher, their expectations are higher. But unfortunately, this has led to, well, this, in which Prince of Persia, they posted this on their Twitter account, and which senior producer at the company said, "I'm extremely proud of our team's work and passion at Ubisoft Montpellier to create a game that resonated with players and critics alike, and I'm confident in its long-term success. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is now at the end of its post-launch roadmap with 3 free content updates and 1 DLC that released in September. We are now focusing on making the game available to more players. Most of the team members who worked on Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown have shifted to other projects that will benefit from their expertise. We know players have a love for this brand, and Ubisoft is excited to bring more Prince of Persia experiences in the future." And many developers in the industry felt nausea with this announcement because, you know, these individuals, they made a fantastic experience. Ubisoft doesn't have a whole lot of those in the last number of years, and they were rewarded with pretty much being shut down and thrown to other projects at the company because they didn't want to have, obviously, negativity with more layoffs. But the reason why we even got this statement is because of this report coming from Insider Gaming. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown team disbanded at Ubisoft, it's claimed. And this was a couple of days before that statement. There won't be a sequel to the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and the team that built the game no longer exists at Ubisoft, according to a new rumor from French journalist Gatos. Ubisoft has disbanded the team behind the game after it failed to reach internal expectations. A sequel for the game was also pitched, but the company rejected it. The report claims that the decision about the future of the game was decided a few weeks after the release, and based on the early numbers, 300,000 sales, I guess it's not surprising. Lastly, it said that Ubisoft didn't want another game because those higher up in the companies, they felt it could cannibalize the potential long-term sales of the first title, which sounds like a Netflix strategy, especially with how they cancel shows after its first or second season. We obviously did get further confirmation, specifically from Ubisoft, which said that we know players have a love for this brand, and in a statement to Eurogamer, the Assassin's Creed publisher largely confirmed what had been reported, though made clear that the game's team were still present and busy at development studio Ubisoft Montpellier, albeit now on other projects that will benefit from their expertise. And then the below statement from the senior producer is pretty much the same thing that they posted on their Twitter account, which we just went over, that they were extremely proud of our team's work and passion, although not so much that, you know, they're going to make a sequel. They're working on other projects, and they hope the game will resonate with, I guess, gamer audiences in the future, blah, 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 blah. Typical PR statement. Pretty much, you know exactly what to expect from this industry. But all of this, the controversy with this game and the fact that it isn't getting a sequel, actually garnered a lot of disgust from the gaming industry, so much so that we saw Baldur's Gate 3 publishing director pretty much yelling at Ubisoft, calling them out for this move. Specifically, he said the director of publishing at Larian, the creator of Baldur's Gate 3, Michael Dowse, feels that low sales are Ubisoft's fault. The Lost Crown was first released everywhere but on Steam, where it appeared 7 months after the launch. And say what you will, but all of these publishers, all these developers taking Epic Games Store money and then, you know, not releasing on Steam, I think that has proven to be such a mistake, and all of them now are running back to Steam, Ubisoft included. And again, Gaben wins at the end of the day. But the last notable game on their platform was arguably Far Cry 6 in 2021. The Crew, Mirage, and Avatar came in 2023 and didn't perform, so you can assume subscriptions were at a lull when Prince of Persia released by 2024, which means people wouldn't be launching their store all too much, this director of publishing said. He believes that if it had been released on Steam, it would have been a market success, and there would likely be a sequel because the team are so strong. It's such a broken strategy. The hardest thing is to make a 85+ game. It is much, much easier to release one. It just shouldn't be done as it was. Speaking of The Crew, Ubisoft is known for its unpopular decisions, lately a lot of them, to be fair, and one of them is shutting down the game, meaning players can't play it anymore even though they paid money for it, which that was a whole controversy in of itself. This whole situation basically reinforces the company's opinion that players should get used to not owning their games. And in every single Ubisoft video, every trailer, I'm glad that people continue to bring this up, because that perspective was quite honestly disgusting, but so much of this company is honestly disgusting. If the statement gamers should get used to not owning their games is true because of a specific release strategy, sub above sales, then the statement developers must get used to not having jobs if they make critically acclaimed game, platform strategy above title sales is also true, and that just isn't sensible even from a business perspective, Dowse said. And for those who maybe not tuned in exactly to everything that happened, this is specifically what they were referencing. about Ubisoft, not owning games. It was a conversation that happened earlier this year in which in an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, Ubisoft's director of subscriptions, Philippe Tremblay, said that players should get used to not owning their games. One of the things we saw is that gamers are used to a little bit like DVD having and owning their titles or games. That's the consumer shift that needs to happen. They got comfortable not owning their CD collection or DVD collection. That's a transformation that's been a bit slower to happen in games. As gamers grow comfortable in that aspect, you don't lose your progress. If you resume your game at another time, your progress file is still there. That's not been deleted. You don't lose what you've built in the game or your engagement with the game. So it's about feeling comfortable with not owning your game. And pretty much he's gaslighting there, saying like, look at all these positives with the digital age. But none of this has anything specifically to say about game ownership. And Ubisoft and many publishers have pretty much just said, oh, game ownership, who cares about that? Especially with all these other benefits that you get from the digital age. Although, as has been indicated and as we've seen with many other games, especially Ubisoft with The Crew, they have shown that they can just steal and take those games away. And as this article from 80 Level points out also, these are predictable words from a director of subscriptions. The problem is players don't feel the same reassurance because this way they lose the right to enjoy a title once they stop giving companies money or if they get banned for any reason, and Ubisoft is largely to blame. And then this specific incident is another problem. I think the whole not owning your games panic peaked last year when a player found out their Ubisoft account was suspended for inactivity, and rumors started spreading, making people fear for their purchases. Later, the company clarified that accounts with games avoid inactivity death, but the idea has already been planted. A company can cut you off from what you paid for. And this is something that also has happened with Electronic Arts, in which you get banned from a game, your whole account is gone, all of your history, all your games, and Electronic Arts' basic response was, well, your fault, not ours, which honestly, this is the future of the gaming industry and why game preservation is so important, and also why I do think there's a need for physical game copies to continue. But we're seeing a transformation, we are, in this industry in which physical sales are starting to die out, and we're seeing many publishers not even releasing physical games. They're just putting codes in some of these physical cases, and or not even doing that. So it is a scary future in this industry in which, owning and playing a game whenever you want definitely is not something that is insured anymore. Now, it is worth mentioning that we did get some more details coming from Insider Gaming about this whole thing going on with Prince of Persia, in which they have an exclusive, Tom Henderson, one of those individuals that had so many sources at Ubisoft, and he outlined specifically that Insider Gaming understands that the decision to move on from Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and any potential sequels made around May of this year and was due to the game missing internal expectations, as the original rumor indicated. Sources say that Ubisoft was expecting The Lost Crown to sell similarly to the biggest Metroidvania in the market, with millions of units sold in a relatively short space of time. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown has sold approximately 1 million units at the time of writing. Ubisoft or any of these AAA publishers with unrealistic expectations isn't surprising. It happens so often, and it also is because of these bloated budgets and development timelines, but all indication is that this project did not have any of that. And it's just, I think it got mired in the politics that's going on with Ubisoft right now, in which this company is crumbling and they need hits so badly, and anything less than that is just, they don't care about it. As for which projects Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown developers have joined, it's understood that the majority have since moved on to 3 different projects. Most of the team has joined the development of Beyond Good and Evil 2, yes, that is still very much alive, which was revived internally in 2017. Around a dozen employees have moved to Project Over, the next mainline Ghost Recon game. Around a dozen have also moved on to Project Steamboat, a Rayman remake in development at Ubisoft Milan. Beyond Good and Evil 2 is a project still a few years away, which this game has already been in development for 16 fucking years. That is insane. This game will very much be able to buy alcohol and fight in a war very, very soon, before it probably even sees the light of day. Developers across the entire publisher are confused as to why Ubisoft continues to invest tens of millions a year in development, which it's never likely to get back. Which, imagine if this game releases like all these other, Ubisoft experiences to another 70 out of 100 and misses sales. I just can only imagine the head explosion that would happen at the top, especially from the Guillemot family, that obviously very much believe in Beyond Good and Evil 2 being this massive hit that I just don't think people care about. I just don't think that mainstream gaming audiences care all that much about Beyond Good and Evil as a franchise anymore. Obviously, they wanted to make a sequel to this game in like 2008, and if they had released that around that time, maybe there would be more interest in this franchise, but again, this has just been non-stop controversy, and very much is similar to the development that we saw with Skull and Bones. Project Steamboat has also proved somewhat unpopular internally, the Rayman remake, as original creator Mikhail Incel looms over the project as a consultant, and Incel was specifically one of the developers, one of the leads on Beyond Good and Evil 2, but he was pretty much fired or let go because of toxic management that was going on. There's a lot of infighting, and he was blamed for it. And a lot of Ubisoft staff do not like him, and they're unhappy that he's been brought back in a consultancy role with this new Rayman remake. And then, as Henderson also says, which I just mentioned a second ago, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown was a perfect project. It was first pitched in June of 2020 and saw a relatively straightforward development pipeline and a luxury that most development teams at Ubisoft don't have. Yet, Ubisoft's ridiculously high internal expectations for such a project have once again prevented developers from exploring creative ideas, which, yeah, it's just unfortunate that this is a great success story in 2024. It'll probably win some Game of the Year awards, and this development team's not even around to really get those awards and, you know, feel the achievement with it. But we did see another report coming from Kotaku, which outlines some more details on Beyond Good and Evil 2, which, yes, is still very much in development, and they say it's still alive and slowly moving forward with new leadership. And specifically, Kotaku reports the co-op space pirate follow-up to the cult hit sci-fi 2003 game made its big debut at E3 2017 with a hands-on demos the following year. Those presentations made a lot of promises about its procedurally generated planetary city, third-person action combat, and seamless transition to outer space, and were led by Beyond Good and Evil creator Mikhail Incel and senior producer Guillaume Brunier, neither of whom are still with this project. Incel left Ubisoft in 2020 amid reports of toxic leadership and chaotic direction, although he's now back and consulting on a new Rayman project. Brunier was removed from Beyond Good and Evil 2 earlier this year, sources told Kotaku at the time, following years of gridlock and indecision about scope, features, and design trade-offs. And I will say that original demo that we saw, I actually thought it looked very impressive, although I think all indication is that that project, that vision of this game is no longer alive. And what version that Beyond Good and Evil 2 exists in now, it might be a lot lesser. Taking his place was Francis Koldebiov, a nearly 30-year veteran of Ubisoft, who's already been working on the game as a producer. And then this report mentions that Beyond Good and Evil 2 is also still recovering from the loss of its creative director last year, Emile Morel, who had previously been the lead game designer on Rayman Legends. He tragically passed away at the age of 40 in July 2023. Now, Fawzi Mesmar, who had already been involved in overseeing the project as VP of Global Creative at Ubisoft, has also taken over Morel's role as creative director. With more than 20 years as an award-winning game designer and creative director, he's been instrumental in the successful launch of over 20 video games. Mesmar previously collaborated with the Beyond Good and Evil 2 team as VP of Editorial. In his new role, he's focused on continuing to build upon the vision set forth by our late friend and colleague. Beyond Good and Evil 2 has now been in development for even longer than the notorious Duke Nukem Forever, which is not an achievement. That is very much scary, because we all know how that game ended up being, and most of these games that end up being like 10, 11, 12 plus years, they end up disappointing for a variety of reasons, but it's mostly because the original vision that most people got, you know, excited for just doesn't exist anymore. And the product that ends up coming about ends up just not delivering on a lot of the expectations that obviously fans originally had for these, you know, highly anticipated games. The game recently successfully passed an internal milestone with positive feedback from company leadership, according to two sources familiar with production. While there's still a lot of work ahead, at least some developers on the project feel like it may have finally found its footing and a clear direction after years of tech issues and internal power struggles. It only took 16 fucking years. 16, guys, 16. Some of those issues culminated in massive burnout at the studio leading the game's development, Ubisoft Montpellier, which ultimately resulted in a government investigation and the managing director leaving. But yes, it does appear that a lot of the developers on the Prince of Persia game have now been brought over to work on this Rayman remake, and the fact that they're unhappy with the company's leadership with this project, just not good at all. And I will say that this Prince of Persia situation very much reminds me of what happened, I think it was earlier this year as well, with Tango Gameworks and Hi-Fi Rush and how Xbox treated them. It just shows how a lot of these massive publishers have sky-high expectations, even for smaller projects like this. But it is worth mentioning that Ubisoft did confirmed that this is a project. They confirmed a new Rayman project is currently in the exploration phase following the reports of a remake. So look, we'll obviously see what ends up happening with this project, but the fact that Ubisoft continues to move so many pieces around, it feels like they're setting themselves up for failure and disaster. None of this is good for, a workplace environment, and the fact that you have developers also on strike, you have many developers speaking out against the development practices at Ubisoft, and many of them protesting the management at Ubisoft. It's just non-stop hit after hit with this company, and the Guillemot family, they continue to not face any consequences with all of this, but very much so, you have companies like Tencent, mega corporations, and maybe some others circling the waters to see what happens, and very much so we could see some drastic changes happening to this company in 2025 or later. We'll see what happens. But anyway, what do you make of the Prince of Persia team no longer existing? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.